Thank you. The archived recorded meeting is available on the NPCA website. The recorded video of the full authority meeting is not considered the official record of that meeting. The official record of the full authority meeting shall consist solely of the minutes approved by the full authority board. So welcome to our guests in the gallery. Welcome board members. First order of business is a declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none, the adoption of the agenda. I'll need a mover to put that agenda on the floor. Member Quirk, second by Member Timms. Any question or comments with respect to adopting the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. Delegations and presentations, we have none this morning, but further on we will have a presentation, I believe, coming forward on the Niagara Remedial Action Plan, and that's Natalie Green, our newest employee. Business, the approval of draft minutes. So I need a mover to put those minutes on the floor. Member Kasperset, seconded by Member, Member Shurton, seconded by Member Kasperset. Those minutes are on the floor for questions or comments. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the draft minutes? Opposed? And those are carried. Business arising from minutes? Any members? Seeing none, takes us to correspondence. Only one piece of correspondence. This was sent to the NPCA as well as our host municipalities with respect to the Niagara Escarpment Commission. There was some contemplation at our last committee meeting with respect to some of the recommendations coming forward out of the Niagara Escarpment Commission plan. Any question or comments with respect to this piece of correspondence? I know there is a motion coming forward at Regional Council, and Member Beatty may want to speak to that one.
Well, I have to apologize. There's slight wording changes that have to occur in terms of that. I think it's been mentioned before. The Escarpment Commission doesn't function the way this body does. In this sense, they don't talk about formulation of an annual budget. They don't look at resources or talk about adding or removing resources, etc. It's strictly an adjudication body in terms of the things that put forward and a policy-making body. However, the director has noted that there needs to be a full examination and is going into that process at the moment. So we're in the process of making some responses at the region in terms of that. For example, we as a body undertook with our strategic plan a process of looking at our planning time in terms of looking at permits. And we went from, I believe, 30 days down to 17 days by changing resources, by doing some things differently, pre-negotiation in particular, in terms of getting people together for collaboration. Those are the kinds of things that we're hoping that the Escarpment Commission will undertake in terms of improving service. You may not be aware, but there basically are two offices for the Escarpment Commission. One is in Georgetown, and the other one is in Thornbury. And the person who's the planner for basically the development permits covers all the way from Brock's Monument all the way up to Georgetown. It's a very massive territory. And what occurs is if something gets appealed or there's a hearing required, that person is drawn from the job of doing the day-to-day, look at new projects to speak to the other issues. So it's a case where they're very under-resourced in what they are currently staffed at. And so there's efforts underway to try and address that.
And thank you for that, Member Beatty. Thank you for keeping this board apprised as well as Regional Council. Our next, any question or comments with respect to that piece of correspondence or Member Beatty's comments? Seeing none, next order of business is Chairman's remarks. I'm going to keep my comments very short. We have a pretty heavy agenda with respect to reports that are coming forward. Just a formal thank you. A thank you to the board and the membership for your dedication and your commitment to the NPCA, whether it's volunteering at our events that we've had over the past few months, keeping up to date with respect to the changes in the Conservation Authorities Act, and keeping your host municipalities updated as well to those changes. So thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your dedication. I understand the huge time commitment that this board takes, and the fact that you sit on this committee lets the people know that they should have confidence in your representation. So thank you for your commitment to the NPCA. Those are my comments. I'm going to move to our acting CAO, Mr. Barrick, for his comments.
Great. Thank you, Chair. The only thing I will state is Mark Brickle sends his regrets. As the newly minted CAO, he did want to be here, although his wife had booked a trip for them prior to being selected as a CAO to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. So I think that's a pretty good rationale not to be here today. So I wanted to pass on those regrets. Thank you.
Okay, short and sweet. Any question or comments with respect to my remarks or interim CAO David Barrick? Seeing none, next order of business, reports for information. So I'm going to need a mover to receive these on block. Moved by Member Beatty, second by Member Beatty. All those in favor of receiving the reports on block? Member Timms?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regard to the reports for information, the capital project status, project 8117. The interest I have is about the master planning process for the Wainfleet Lake Erie Shoreline projects. The scope of that project does not include the regional beach that is owned by the region but managed by the Conservation Authority. And I thought perhaps we need to, well, first an explanation of why we're not considering or including that piece of property that we manage in this overall master plan. And then I have a suggestion of what we might do to draw it into the master plan, even though it's a bit late in the stage. So we're going to have an explanation about, first of all, why it's not included.
Okay, all right, so let me adjust the first order of business was to move all these reports on block. I'm going to ask all those in favor of receiving the reports on block, and then we're going to open up for questions, certainly yours. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, those are all on the floor. Member Tim's question. Can you specifically point us to where you're quoting from, Bruce?
Yes, it's 8117. And
Okay, capital project status report. Okay, we'll try to get an answer for that. Mr. Barrick?
Thank you, through you, Chair. The region's access beach is maintained by the Conservation Authority on an annual basis, specifically from the staff at the Long Beach Conservation Area. It is not an NPCA-owned asset, and because the maintenance agreement is annual, the region can choose another provider at any season. And to put it into a long-term master plan, there's no guarantee that the NPCA will even be maintaining it next year. And so that was some of the logic behind not including it on the master plan. The master plan includes our owned properties only.
okay, so I understand that rationale, but I would ask the board to consider, and maybe a report next time round, but that we decide to deliberately include it in our master plan and perhaps ask permission from the region to consider that beach within our scope. Because of the parking, the demand for beach space, the competition it offers to our own Long Beach, the environmental studies about what the ecology of the beach, it's all so in tune with or comparable to the beach studies that we're already doing. It seems to me a wasted opportunity. But given that it's, as you say, an annual contract with the region and we don't know what the region's doing, I'd like to offer that we make a request, this board make a request of the region to include that beach in our master plan so that we can give some guidance. I am a little bit concerned that the region, because it's, as you say, an annual thing, that the region at some point could say, oh, well, we're going to dispose of that. So we're operating in isolation where we could have, with not too much extra effort, included in our master plan and have some recommendation to the region, some comment to the region about what might be a long-term plan with that property and maybe how it could integrate with our long-term plan. So I'd move that, put a motion on the floor then, Mr. Chairman, that the Conservation Authority engage in discussions with the region about the long-term plan for that property and considering the work we're doing on a master plan.
Okay, so to that point, we don't craft motions ad hoc, so if it's a notice of motion, we'll entertain that certainly, and that will come forward the next available cycle. If you are looking to waive that notice, then obviously it's going to need two-thirds of this council. So it's your prerogative, Member Timms, to put that forward. I'm going to suggest, though, that there is some investigative work and maybe some information that should come forward along with that. So maybe it would be appropriate to make it as a notice of motion, and the board can get that information in order to make a value decision.
Well, I understand. That's why I was thinking in terms of the motion to receive the report, that we could amend that motion to receive reports on this particular area. But the concern I have about your suggestion is that we don't meet until September. There's going to be a lot of work happening in between, and perhaps there's some other way to give staff direction to initiate the conversation immediately. The notice of motion doesn't authorize staff to initiate any effort until sometime in September, and that would be a concern. So is there another way we can get staff to initiate that conversation?
So I'm going to make a suggestion. Obviously, there's always implications when we incur more properties and more responsibilities. Having the conversation doesn't require any output of resources other than staff time. So I would suggest that you make it a staff direction to engage our regional partners to start those conversations, and based on those conversations, come back to this board with some information. And at that time, with that information, you could craft a motion to move forward.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation. But again, it's your prerogative, Member Timms.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think as long as the staff direction is recorded in the minutes, and perhaps staff could give us a comment on that notion before we actually register it.
So I will accept that as staff direction. Any questions or comments? Member Quirk?
Thank you, Chair. Just to Member Tim's comments, I know that the region has asked the authority to look at the services that we do provide to the region currently as a holistic view of the various departments that we provide for. I don't think it would be too much of a stretch. I don't know how far they're into those conversations, but I don't think it would be too much of a stretch just to ask staff to add that to their agenda when they meet with the region to discuss those programs.
I agree.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then the direction would be to it's a direction to ask staff to come back with a report to support the notice of motion. And maybe that would serve the purpose.
Let's not presuppose what the outcome of those discussions will be. So ultimately, they're going to have a conversation. They're going to bring forward all the information, and based on the information, it's incumbent on this board to, either support your motion that's going to come forward or not. So we're not having staff bring forward information that's going to presuppose or prejudice the outcome. So let's be clear there.
I would hope it would inform the outcome, not prejudice it.
Yeah.
So if we can do both then, the staff direction to initiate the conversation.
Correct.
So that they have some information, and then I also file with you then the notice of motion for our next meeting that the Niagara access property be included in our Lake Erie waterfront master plan.
Okay, so I'll accept that as notice of motion. If you can pass on the exact verbiage and wording of that notice of motion to Lisa,
right,
and it'll be available at the next board meeting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Shurton.
Yeah, I got a question, and maybe hopefully staff can provide it. It's on report number 10, operation status report for the second quarter, report number 79. Just notice the chart on page 7917 page 3 of 11. Benbrook, the expenses, well, they seem to be quite high based on the revenue, and I'm assuming that's maybe because of the extra dollars spent for the Canada celebration with the splash pad. Am I to assume that, or is that a normal expense, a yearly expense to date for Benbrook?
I'll have Mr. Barrick, but I know Adam is here as well, that maybe he can answer that question.
Yeah, that's a correct assumption.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another item in that group was 8517, a response to the Conservation Authorities Act review. The recommendation is that we receive, but I note in the report that there are 3 points that we want to make, I think, with the minister. It was the jurisdictional crowding, provincial offenses court, and definitions. And I wonder if we should, I would suggest that we formalize our concerns in a letter back to the minister, identifying what this report suggests as further improvements that could be made to the board. So the recommendation is that we receive, and we've done that. So I don't know, my motion would be that the Conservation Authority Chair inform by letter the Minister of our concerns as pointed out in this report, items 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, I accept that.
Need a seconder, do I?
Member Beatty?
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments with respect to any of the reports coming forward? Okay, so this time I'm going to have Natalie come forward. Natalie, welcome. Natalie will be presenting on the Niagara River Remedial Action Plan update. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you. I'll just wait for a moment. The presentation isn't up. Thank you so much for having me and for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you today about the Niagara River. Where's my button? The Niagara River is probably best known for its incredible drop in elevation, as you can see here, resulting in the Niagara Falls, which attracts thousands of tourists annually. The river's history is rich and fascinating, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows over the falls. Exploitation of this natural resource over hundreds of years has resulted in severe historical pollution problems. The pollution problems can be traced as far back as the late 1890s, shortly after the Niagara Falls Power Corporation began operation, creating the opportunity for several large chemical companies on the US side of the river to take advantage of power. As the population grew and technology advanced, issues with water quality and water pollution became much more prevalent. For a long time, the common societal mentality was that the solution to pollution is dilution, and we know now that that's not the case. Regulations on water pollution were either non-existent or very much lacking, and not just here in the Great Lakes as a whole. Water pollution throughout the Great Lakes led to a lot of different issues, culminating in the 60s and 70s. Bald eagle populations were nearly decimated. People thought Lake Erie was actually dying, and some rivers caught on fire, as you can see on the slide there on the left. All of these issues and pressure from the public led to several very important policies being created beginning in the 60s and 70s, one of which being the Canada-US Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. This agreement, which was first signed in 1972 and then amended as new and emerging concerns became prevalent in 1978, 1987, and most recently in 2012. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement commits both countries, US and Canada, to work together to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the waters of the Great Lakes system. At around the same time, Canada and Ontario came into an agreement to fulfill Canada's goals and obligations under that Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement through an agreement called the Canada-Ontario Agreement respecting the Great Lakes Basin, which was most recently revised in 2014. These two documents are the two guiding documents for the Canadian Remedial Action Plan teams. The 1987 revision to the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement called for the development and implementation of cleanup plans called Remedial Action Plans to restore ecosystem health at 43 different areas of concern, or AOCs. The AOCs are locations throughout the Great Lakes Basin that were deemed to be significantly worse than other locations in the Great Lakes Basin. There were 12 in Canada, 26 in the United States, and 5 which are shared by both countries, including the Niagara River. The ultimate goal of a remedial action plan is to complete restoration activities in order to remove a location from this list of areas of concern. The process of removing an AOC from this list is called delisting. And delisting occurs when all locally defined actions are completed and the government in both countries can agree that scientific evidence shows that the area is no worse than other Great Lakes locations and that there's public support in favor of delisting. To date, Canada has delisted 3 areas of concern and has completed all remedial actions in a 4th. Canada has also designated 2 areas of concern as areas of concern in recovery, signifying that all the actions have been completed and now we're waiting for natural recovery to take place. The United States to date have delisted 4 AOCs, and the Niagara River is one of 36 remaining areas of concern. The Niagara River, Ontario area of concern concerns itself with only the Canadian side of the river. However, the AOC itself extends from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario on both sides of the border, and there is a similar plan in progress on the US side. So what we focus on here through the Canadian Remedial Action Plan program is the Canadian side of the border. Now, the AOC is the river itself. However, we do recognize that the watershed may have a potential impact on the river, and so some restoration efforts are implemented in the watershed when they are needed. So what's a RAP? We like to use a lot of acronyms. I mentioned earlier a remedial action plan is a cleanup plan. And more than just a cleanup plan, the RAPs represent a partnership of several different locally based organizations that all have a stake in the health of the Niagara River ecosystem. It includes federal and provincial government, municipalities, environmental organizations such as the NPCA, industry, non-government organizations, First Nations and Métis communities, as well as the public, that all work together toward the same goal of restoring and protecting the Niagara River area of concern. The RAPs follow guidance from the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, as I mentioned earlier, and lead cleanup from a local perspective. Our main goal is to complete restoration, the restoration of beneficial water uses, and ultimately remove an area of concern from that list of Great Lakes AOCs. So how do we know how we're doing? How do we measure our success? How do we know when it's time to delist? All of the AOCs use a set of 14 different indicators related to the use and enjoyment of water. While they're all the same for all the AOCs, the way that they're implemented and the way that they're examined in each of the AOCs is very different because it is locally driven. So I'll show you a few of them as an example. So things that provide us with the use and enjoyment of water: having fish safe for eating, waters free of garbage, oil, and scum, aquatic bugs and plants to feed fish, clean beaches for swimming, habitat to support fish and wildlife, waters free of excess algae. And these are just a few of the 6. They 6 fit on the slide, so that's what I chose to go with. So the goal is to complete locally defined actions for each of those 14 indicators that are considered to be a problem for the area of concern. So when something interferes with the enjoyment of a water use, we call it a beneficial use impairment, or a BUI. When you take the status of the BUIs together, it tells us the overall condition of the Niagara River. So you look on the slide here. These are the icons to represent the Niagara River. We have currently 6 beneficial uses that are considered to be impaired. Those are in red. There are 7 that are not impaired. Those are noted in green, and 1 that requires further assessment. So by looking at all of those icons, or the BUIs as a whole, you can tell that the AOC is still impaired, but we're definitely seeing some progress and the scales are starting to tip toward the green side. The RAP's job is to complete actions that will lead to changing the status of each of the beneficial use impairments from red to green. Once the required actions are complete, we assess the indicator on against locally defined goals. If it meets the criteria, then the RAP initiates a redesignation process by which the status of an indicator can be changed, for example, from red to green. So what have we been up to? What's next for our Niagara River? I'm pleased to report that 2 BUI assessments were recently completed and also have gone through scientific peer review. Each assessment recommends changing the status of their respective BUI to not impaired. So in the fall of 2017, we'll begin soliciting public input on the recommendation to change the status of eutrophication or undesirable algae, BUI number 8, and BUI number 13, degradation of phytoplankton and zooplankton populations, from red to green or yellow to green, respectively. If there is public support in favor of changing the status of these BUIs, then we will prepare the appropriate documentation to be submitted to the Canada-Ontario Agreement leads, which are Environment Canada and the MOE, to make the change official. I'd also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge that the RAP team previously identified its goal to delist the Niagara River by December of 2019. However, it is more accurate to state that our goal is to complete priority actions for delisting the AOC by December of 2019. Based on recent information, it is possible that this goal will not be met. However, the decision to initiate the delisting process and whether or not we're at that point will be made by the RAP team and the public, of course, as we get closer to 2019 and more information becomes available. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today, and thank you for your continued engagement and activities in restoring and protecting the Niagara River. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Natalie. So we're going to open, so stay right there. We're going to open up to members' questions, and we'll go around this way first. Member Shirt, and then Member Diodati, Member Beatty.
Nice presentation, Natalie. Do we have an idea how we currently measure on those 6 items you mentioned, like fish safe for eating, or do we have any numbers on how close they are being moved from one side of the scale from impaired to not impaired?
Yes, actually, so each of those indicators have their own delisting criteria, so we have a way of knowing which ones will be, what actions need to be completed for each of them. And we have a document that we're currently preparing that I'm trying to put together called the Delisting Plan, which shows all of the actions that we have completed and all of the actions that are left. And the actions that have been completed are much more heavily weighted to that side than what's left to do. And currently, what we're focusing on are the ones that are in red, if I can go back here. So the ones that are red, those 6 that are red are the ones. So they're not the same as the gray ones that you saw earlier. I just put.
Okay, so those that's currently that we have a few already not impaired, and then we still have some. Okay.
Yes.
I wasn't clear when I read that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Question through you to Natalie is, did I understand correctly that first you would go to the stakeholders and see if they desired having it delisted and then tell them what we need to do? Is that what I heard?
No, so those are 2 separate processes. So this is why I'm here, is to try to clarify that. So delisting the entire AOC is something different than just changing the status of these particular BY. So what will happen is once we get to the point where, if you look at the scale, most or all of the icons are on the green side, and we've shown that we've completed all actions and the science is showing us evidence that we can delist, then we would go to the public and all the stakeholders and look for input. And then if that process is accepted, then we would go to the government and ask to be delisted. So that only happens with local public support. So right now what we're doing in the fall is just looking to change the status of one of the red ones there, the one at the very top of the triangle, eutrophication and undesirable algae, and also the one that's in the middle, the yellow one, the phytoplankton, zooplankton. So we're looking to just change the status of those 2 particular beneficial use impairments, not delisting as a whole. They're 2 separate things.
Okay, so through your chair, so then if that happens and we tip the scale that much more, are there things that we can do locally that you would suggest, even municipally or regionally, that will help this process?
Yes, of course. Yeah, just asking questions helps actually. So that's really great. Being involved in the RAP team, which I'm trying to get everybody engaged again and doing some more public outreach to get the public engaged again is helpful. Helping us spread the message. There are some actions that will require local input, and right now we are working very closely with Niagara on the Lake, for example, for the beach closings BUI, with a particular beach on that area. So those opportunities, as they come up, then we can try to make partnerships in that way. Other than that, just helping us get the message out. And if you're curious about the delisting plan moving forward, and if there's any actions that require specific input, then we would love to have your participation. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I guess my bigger thing is, I mean, what can we do? What types of things are we going to be able to do? I understand there's a number of plants further up the lake and the river, factories that are part of our problem. I know we can do so much downriver, but until we figure out what's happening upriver and what's being put into the river. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, get my head wrapped around where we fall in on this whole plan.
Yeah, and there are a number of different plans that are all kind of happening at the same time as well. So there's the Niagara River Toxics Management Plan. That is also another binational plan, which started in around the same time as the Remedial Action Plan, that works towards reducing toxics in the Niagara River, and that's coming to 30 years of being completed now, and they've done a lot of really great work as well, so we'll be celebrating with them. So there's those plans that exist in parallel to the Remedial Action Plan. So we're not the only existing process for protecting the river. There's also the Lake Erie and the Lake Ontario management plans that we would fall under and piggyback on, and some existing government monitoring plans. So we're trying, that's why we're a partnership, and we're trying to make sure that everybody is involved, because there are so many different issues that are not just Niagara River. Those may fall under the Great Lakes plans as opposed to just our specific area of concern plan.
Natalie, refresh my memory. I recall a presentation being made to the regional council on RAP, and I don't know whether it had to be endorsed by several or all of the regional municipalities, and there was at least one community that did not support RAP. Could you refresh my memory? Where is this going? Is my memory correct? And the other concern I had was there seemed to be a lot of hot spots on the U.S. side, many more than the Canadian side, and what are our American neighbors doing to address the situation as well?
There we go. So you have two questions. The first one related to, oh my goodness, already I'm blanking.
So maybe I might be able to help Member Maloney
Sure.
here. And I remember we did have those discussions with respect to Ramsar
Right.
designation. So I don't know if you're conflating the two with RAP and Ramsar, but
I could possibly be.
I was just going to say, that might be possibly what you're thinking about is Ramsar, which is a separate process, thank you, Mr. Chair, which is a separate process from the Remedial Action. So Ramsar is a designation process, and they were at some point looking for support from municipalities to seek. That is happening separate from the RAP process. They're two different things, very, very different things. However, the RAP team is looking into whether or not the Ramsar designation fits into our goals of changing the messaging when we're ready to delist from a degraded area to a really great area to celebrate. So though we are separate processes, we are trying to work together in terms of providing similar messaging. In terms of the U.S. side, so I'd mentioned earlier the Toxics Management Plan. So there are a lot of plans in progress, and there's also a similar Remedial Action Plan process on the U.S. side, and they get their own separate funding. The major issues that they're dealing with right now, as far as I'm aware, is habitat restoration, and then the toxic management, which is happening through a different plan as well, to reduce those inputs that are happening on the U.S. side. And they've done a really great job so far. I believe it's over 50% of toxics have been reduced going into the Niagara River.
And I do believe it's
on the United States.
And I do believe it's a timely comment that Member Maloney makes is I know there was full rejection of the president's attempt to cut funding to the health of the Great Lakes. So I know our Republican colleagues in the U.S. Dismissed those cuts. So that's good news as well with respect to helping those hotspots on the U.S. side.
Yes, they'll be continuing to get funding. So that's great.
Member Beatty.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I can remember in the 50s, my parents driving along Niagara Falls, heading towards Grand Island, etc., and just couldn't believe the amount of pollution. So we have really come a long way in terms of the improvement of the health of that river. I would strongly recommend that this presentation and perhaps stuff about the Ramsar designation be part of our biennial tour that we're planning. I think it's very important for people to understand that you can make a difference in terms of the health and ecology of a river, a waterway. I would like later on somehow to get an idea of what the various symbols are. And maybe I'll focus on one right now. I'm seeing a green fish at the top right. I'm seeing another fish with a fork beside it on the bottom left, or bottom left on the right-hand side. But I'm seeing fish dangling over on the red side. So could you help what the three different fishes are?
Sure, yeah, and for short presentations, I try very hard not to use too many words, so my apologies for that. But so the symbol, on the green side, the fish with the little thing coming out of its head, that's actually supposed to be fish tumors. So there is one of the beneficial use impairments that is related to fish being exposed to a contaminant and then getting tumors on them. We don't have that issue in the Niagara River. Other areas of concern do. The one with the fish and the plate with a fork, that's related to the tainting of fish and wildlife flavor, and that's not an issue in the Niagara River either. So that is more related to, for example, if you had a very industrial area where fish sometimes can accumulate petroleum-based products and then they have a taste to them. So that's not indicated as an issue in the Niagara River. On the left-hand side, the fish dangling from a line, that's restrictions of fish consumption, so angling, and so recreational fishing and being able to eat fish from the Niagara River. And there are still restrictions on the consumption of fish in the Niagara River, and that is guided by the Ministry of Environment and Ministry of Natural Resources.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
I think all activities need some kind of a trophy to point to. And this is a potential trophy for the world to look at in terms of, in particular, as we're entering into a period of perhaps significant climate change and what we can do about it as human beings. So congratulations on the work being done. I would hope that the work would continue actively to proceed to 2019, 2021, whatever it's going to be for a delisting. And I also would hope that we would continue to look for the Ramsar designation. I know that one of the perceptions of the Ramsar issue is that because it deals with wetlands, people confuse it with the definition of wetlands as it's known by the MNRF in the province of Ontario. But I think we should continue efforts on both sides. And for the Ramsar designation, those who don't remember that presentation, there are 9 criteria by which you can determine whether you fit for that. We, in fact, in Niagara, have all 9 of those criteria that could be met. So I think it's something that should be pursued. Thank you.
Those comments. Any other questions for Natalie? Member Joyner.
Thank you, Natalie, for the presentation. I just want to turn to the page where it says what's next for our Niagara River. And we look at down here that the BUI number 8, eutrophication of undesirable algae. In reading some recent reports in the green algae bloom that is being established in Lake Erie, how close are we to moving it from left to right? From what I read, it's not very close at all. Is that true?
So thank you for your question. This particular BUI is focused, again, only on the Niagara River system. So we went out and there was a study done to measure 6 different variables that indicate problems with eutrophication and undesirable algae in the Niagara River. And there were no issues with chlorophyll A, dissolved oxygen, phosphates, and soluble reactive phosphorus. So there are several of them for the Niagara River itself. Now for Lake Erie, the western basin of Lake Erie is probably what you're referring to. That's sort of a separate plan, and from our research, that is not impacting the Niagara River as far as we can tell in the studies that we've done and all the analysis that we've done, and that the peer review agrees with that as well.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Natalie, thank you for that clarification, because I would have thought that anything that's in either the western, the central, or the eastern portion of Lake Erie, being that it flows down the Niagara River, would be impacted. Mm-hmm. I would have never thought that it would not be impacted.
algal bloom tracker tool online now, and you can check online and see the blooms as they happen. They can predict them 5 days in advance. And even if you look at that map, you can see that the blooms typically kind of stay in the western basin. The 3 basins in Lake Erie are somewhat separated in such that they happen on the western side and don't really seem to look like they mix to the central and eastern side. So just as an interest to you, you may want to Google that. It's really great. It's really neat.
Member Timms.
Thank you, Natalie, and I appreciate the presentation. The last line about the goal to delist by 2019 is a little disappointing and not exactly what I had understood a year and a half ago. That we were pretty pleased with our progress and led us to pursue the Ramsar designation. But at this point, I wonder what has changed.
Nothing really has changed more than just the terminology wasn't quite correct. What we're trying to do is complete all of our actions for restoration. Delisting is a fairly long process, and it involves a lot of public input, and you need to have a lot of documentation put together before you are ready to delist. And so we just want to make sure that we have everything in place and that all the actions are completed by 2019. And then what we're hoping still to achieve, so it's just a change in terminology, just to be more clear, because all the AOCs are kind of struggling with the terminology a little bit, that we're looking to complete all actions by 2019, and hopefully by 2019, if all goes well, we can still recommend the delisting process at that time, and that would be initiated, and then we would have to go through all of the process that's required by the RAP program, putting all the documentation together. As you can understand, it's not an easy feat.
I understand you've had experience with running through the whole delisting process.
With the redesignation process, because I worked on the Detroit River for 6 years, and the Detroit River is nowhere near delisting right now, but they're moving forward very quickly as well. We're all getting a big push to complete all actions. So I have a lot of experience with redesignating BUIs and doing public input and trying to get everybody excited about the program.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm glad to see you're on the job with this, but I just wanted to ask you to, in your presentation, the reference to the burning river was not the Niagara River, I trust, and not anywhere on the Canadian side. So I appreciate the drama invested in the picture. I'd rather we have something that was reflective of our situation and not the burning river of Chicago or Cleveland or wherever that was.
It was a Cayuga.
Okay.
And yes, it was to show the issues in the Great Lakes as a whole, because it was quite severe in the 70s, and some people may remember how bad it was and how far we've come. So it has to be a little dramatic.
Thank you, Member Tim. So just a couple of questions. So when you talk about 2019, and that date will have to be adjusted, that's not due to backsliding with respect to the health. That's bureaucracy.
More or less, it was a terminology that we're just trying to be clear about, that being delisted by 2019 is different from complete on all actions by 2019. And as we approach that time and we start finishing these actions that are part of our delisting plan, we'll have a much better idea of how far we are from accomplishing that goal. So I'm hoping to come to you next year with even more exciting news.
Okay, so now just one last question, hopefully to wrap up your presentation. Now, I know part of our responsibility is to educate the public as far as what our role and responsibility is at the NPCA. And I know that there's been a misconception that somehow that the NPCA is leading this program, the RAP program. So can you just educate the board, educate those in the public as far as what the process is, explain your autonomy with respect to what you're doing, and maybe the governance model as far as the RAP program?
Off again. Sure, thank you, yes. So the RAP program is, I'm a staff of the NPCA, but I represent the whole team, the whole partnership that is the Remedial Action Plan. So as I mentioned earlier, the RAP program is locally based, and we try to incorporate all the stakeholders that have something to do with the Niagara River. And so as much as I work in the offices of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, I very much represent everybody who's involved in the health and restoration of the Niagara River ecosystem. So there is some autonomy there in terms of the projects that we do are not led by the NPCA themselves, not all of them. Some of them are because we're a partnership, and the NPCA is one of our biggest partners. They receive funding, or you receive funding from the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario to fulfill the government's duties, that is administering the program, coordinating all of the efforts, getting studies done, making sure that people that are involved, that need to be involved, are involved. And so it's very much the model in all of the AOCs is meant to be a partnership, and it's meant to be guided by the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, but very much a locally based program, dealing with local issues with local people that know the area, love the area, and live here.
Appreciate that. Thanks for that clarification, Natalie. One last question. With respect to targets, is there fidelity between the U.S. side's targets and what our targets are? And those are bound by treaties as far as the metrics that they utilize as far as those targets?
So on the U.S. side, they have a similar remedial action plan process. They have the same 14 beneficial use impairment indicators that we do as well. They have different regulations and different players involved, different stakeholders, so they function separately but in parallel with us. And we do liaise on projects where we need to, and I actually, as an example, I participate in all the U.S. meetings, communicate progress that we're doing on the Canadian side. If there's opportunities for us to collaborate, then those opportunities are pursued. So it's more right now of a friendly collaboration type a way of moving forward. So the U.S. is implementing their own projects with their own funding, but we collaborate where we can and when we can. And as far as delisting goes, for the U.S. side and the Canadian side, there are, it's not a treaty, but in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, excuse me, it does say that a Canadian AOC can delist with a U.S. side not delisted yet. So that will be interesting as we get to that point. I'm not sure how the RAP team and the stakeholders are going to want to go forward with that, but that language is in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement.
Your comments, and thank you for your presentation. Any other members have questions for Natalie? Seeing none, thank you, Natalie, for your presentation. And we're going to take Member Beatty's comments with respect to the biennial tour, and maybe this is something that we can bring forward because it is very Niagara-centric, and it may be worthwhile to highlight. So thank you for that. Okay. We moved to put them on the floor to discuss. Now I am going to need a motion to receive for information. Moved by Member Jeffs, seconded by Member Timms. All those in favor of receiving en bloc. Member Quirk?
Sorry, what was the outcome? I know that Member Timms made a motion to amend one of the reports with respect to it. I don't think we actually voted on that, but we just moved it. We went into the report. So if we could just, well, no, I think actually Member Timms actually had a motion to do something with respect to the Conservation Act review, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, my suggestion was...
So let's lift that one. How about we lift that one?
Perfect.
Okay, and if you'd like to lift that one right now, and that's item number 16, report number 8517. Let me deal with the rest of them first.
Great.
Is there any other reports members would like lifted in order to speak directly to them or amend? Seeing none, let's remove item 16 for now. Items 6 through 15, all those in favor of receiving for information? Opposed? And those are all carried. Now we are dealing with item 16C, Act Review, Bill 139, Comparative Review, lifted by Member Timms. Member Timms, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The recommendation is that we receive for information, and I would like to add to that we confirm the NPCA support for the review recommendations with additional concerns as outlined in items 1, 2, and 3 in this report. And that the chair, Conservation Authority chair, express our concerns to the minister in writing.
Okay, so that amendment is on the floor. It is seconded, duly seconded by Member Quirk. Any questions or comments to that amendment going forward? Seeing none, I understand that there is a time restriction to it because comments do have to be received by July, is it 30th, Mr. Graham?
It is near the end of the month, so I will take that as staff direction in terms of I can put a written response together for on your behalf and send it to you and for your review and submittal.
Okay, all right, so if that's acceptable to Member Timms, as far as that's reflected in here? Yep, okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Our next item for business is reports for consideration. I will need a mover for report number 86-17 to put it on the floor. Moved by Member Timms, seconded by Member Beatty. Questions or comments to the Great Lakes Sustainability Funding Agreement? Seeing none, I'll call the question that the motion that the NPCA enter into an agreement with Environment and Climate Change Canada to accept the Great Lakes Sustainability Fund grant of $50,000 towards the implementation of environmental projects required to meet the goals and objectives identified in the 2009 Niagara River Ontario Remedial Action Plan Stage 2 report. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Our next item, I need a mover to put that on the floor. Member Shurton, and it is proposed 2019 wedding fee schedule, Balls Falls, CA, report number 8717, seconded by Member Quirk. It is on the floor for question or comments. Member Shurton.
Yeah, through the chair. I like the idea that there's strong demand. I see there's 14 couples that want to use this facility in 2019, which is 2 years out. My question was twofold. One, I'm assuming staff has compared our Balls Falls area to competition, and what that relates to is, at first I was thinking all I do is see an increase in the cost. I just don't know if we're pricing ourselves too high out of the market, and maybe with 14 couples for 2019 we aren't yet, but I don't want to just keep going up and up with the good demand, because there could be reach a boiling point where people say it's getting too pricey to get married there. So I'd like some clarification comment about what is our competition for this place? Maybe there's none. And do we just, like I just noticed our rates, you just 500 one year, 200 the next year. Like, how are these numbers, what are they based on? Thanks.
Well, I know that, there has been some market research that has gone into this, and what we want to do is create parity within the marketplace as far as inviting those wedding guests. But I'm going to have Member Barrick speak to that, and then maybe Adam can touch base on that as well. Sorry, Mr.
Great.
Barrick.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, thanks for the question, Member Shurton. A couple of years ago, there was a significant review on rates, not only for Balls Falls and for weddings, but across the facilities. And the concern at the time was that the user rates were subsidized by the levy. So we've moved closer towards market rates to comparables throughout the area. I'll ask Adam to speak next, but Balls Falls, for example, I believe was still lower than market, and rather than increase it too substantially that it had a bit of a sticker shock, we did discuss kind of a phased-in approach, and this is part of that process. But I'd ask if Adam has anything to offer.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Just to reiterate what Dave said, we did believe our research showed that we were below market value, but it's also difficult because for our weddings, we just rent the facility. So you could have, once you rent the facility, you can choose a variety of caterers that can, you can have a wedding, a very high-end wedding that can be comparative with weddings in Niagara on the Lake, or you can also have a more low-end wedding by just doing your own food and catering, right? So it's tough to do it that way, but for just rental facilities, we feel we're now at marketplace. The main reason why we did this now is because the way the weddings work, we feel like we were losing out with people booking weddings in advance, because by the time we waited till November, they'd already moved on. They wanted their wedding date booked, so that's why we brought it on now.
No, I totally agree. I do know when it's time to book. I just can't, I admire people looking 2 years out to find a facility to get married. But in saying that, I appreciate the information on it, and I think it's great that facility is being used, and thanks for the information.
Member Jeffs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to speak to the same thing, I don't know what's going on with my mic. these things are trendy, like the wedding market is trendy, and right now it's really popular to have weddings in barns and the rustic theme and everything. So I agree that these prices are in line, and I hear a lot of good things about having weddings at Balls Falls, and I know that we're busy, but I'm just wondering, do we have any kind of plan, like if this takes a dip? Because I could potentially see, again, everything's trendy. I mean, there aren't a ton of venues in Niagara. Like I guess what I'm trying to say is there's always the people to fill the venues in Niagara, but I just worry, are we going to get too high priced and then have things kind of level out and the trend be something else, and then we're not getting as many people? So are we kind of keeping that in the back of our mind, or just kind of making that point? But if staff wanted to answer that, that'd be great.
Mr. Barrick, backup plan?
Thank you, Chair. I think the fact that the rates are viewed and reviewed annually does take that into consideration. Staff do the research and the comparables every year. And the other thing is it's the supply and demand, and we know the demand is really strong. If we see that there's vacancies, I think that's a good indicator as when to readjust. But currently they are reviewed annually, and they're for the board to review. Thank you.
Question or comments with respect to report number 87-17? Oh, Member Beatty.
Just a question in terms of capacity. Looking at the current year or the year before, et cetera, how close to full capacity are we in terms of wedding receptions here?
Adam?
Yeah, our barn is at full capacity, and the Glen Elgin room, which we've made you can see from our strategic initiatives report, has made huge strides, and we're now up about 70% range.
Okay, because I had wondered for smaller weddings, it would have to be, we still have access to the St. John Center, which would be a very attractive venue for small weddings, etc. And I'm just wondering if staff can give some consideration to that, or other events at the St. John Center. Is it 12 times per year? I forget what the number is that we have access.
Mr. Mayor?
Through you, Chair, thank you. And thanks for the question, Member Beatty. The authority has an agreement with the Niagara Catholic District School Board. They are the main tenant of that facility, and there's other partners that are there. To your point, within the agreement, though, the NPCA still has access to the property for any purposes the authority deems, for I believe it's 20 weekends throughout the year. We have historically had a handful of requests for small weddings there. We have assessed the logistics, and to be able to accomplish what some of the requests that have come forward does price us out a little bit more. In other words, it's not a facility like this where we have everything here. Things would have to be there. So it hasn't become something that is marketable yet. And the other concern is the footprint that's left behind with a number of people that would be trampling the property. So with that said, I think it's a good point. I think maybe it's something that perhaps the strategic initiatives team can review and create a kind of a smaller template if it's like 50 people or something to put together. I think that's something that's fair for us to work on.
Thank you for that, and I recognize the restrictions in terms of the site and parking, etc. Perhaps a subset of that could be wedding photography, where you'd have a smaller number of people in terms of, again, a very attractive site for photography to be considered as a potential fundraiser. I talked with the person that's on the Escarpment Commission from Hamilton, and actually photographers, there's a fee for doing photography for weddings at their conservation sites and so on. I'm not suggesting that for here for Balls Falls, but something for St. John's Center, a smaller venue, might be a consideration. Thank you.
So we'll move that forward as staff direction with respect to investigating revenue opportunities at St. John's. Okay, thank you for that, Member Beatty. Member Diodati.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to see a little more comprehensive on this. I didn't feel there was enough detail. For example, when we say we're at 100%, is that 7 days a week? Because now it's more popular to have weddings on Fridays and Sundays and weekdays because everything else is booked. And I'll tell you, I don't want to be below the market. We should be in the middle of the market. We're competing with the private sector, and we're, arguably subsidized because it's done on the levy. I wouldn't want to be taking business away from them. To me, it's a luxury. If you want to get married at a conservation authority, that's great, but it isn't cheap. And I'd also like to know, what are the options? Are there different rates? Are these the rates 7 days a week? If you get married on a Tuesday, is it a lower rate, versus a Friday or a Saturday, the more popular days? So I'd like to see a little more detail and a little more of a schedule. So people, if you're on a tight budget, you get married during the week. And that's what people are doing now. Or the problem is now, as you can see, we have a waiting list of 14 couples for 2 years out. So that's a lot of planning. So some people, by the time it comes to booking, there's nothing available. So I just like to see us have a little more comprehensive report. I mean, this is fine, but I'd like to see a little more detail, a little more spread, a little more thought, a little more pro forma on how this would play out with the different scenarios and the other opportunities. Like, whether, I know in the Parks Commission, if you want to do photographs, some people want to go by the old hydro plants, and they want to do them in the floral gardens or by the clocks. And there's a fee schedule. If you want to do things like that, you don't just show up and take. So I think we have opportunities here. It's beautiful, and anything that can help fund what we're doing now, I think we should explore it.
Okay, so 2 points out of that. Obviously, piggybacking on Member Beatty's request about revenue opportunities, that's the first point. I'll put this to Adam. And Adam, can we flesh out those details and maybe bring those forward in third quarter?
Yes,
reporting?
absolutely.
And just boil down some of those metrics coming forward in a little bit more detail. That'd be appreciated. Take that as staff direction. Member Diodati, is that okay? Any other questions? Oh, Member Quirk?
Sorry, Chair, through you, based on what Member Diodati has suggested, if we approve this now, are we not setting these in stone? Like, is the member asking us to come back with a more comprehensive numbering fee schedule? Or, like, are we asked? That's my question to the member, I guess.
Through your chair, that's what I would be suggesting that.
Okay, so I'm going to entertain that then. If we need a more detailed fee structure for 2019 coming forward, then I'm going to suggest someone make a deferral motion for this one, send it back to get those answers, and maybe bring it back at the next cycle with some of the details that Member Diodati is looking for, as well as some of the other revenue opportunities. It's going to take some investigative work on staff to bring those ideas forward, and maybe at that particular time we can ratify a fee schedule. So,
sorry, just before, I've already spoken to it, so I can't move deferral, but has anyone, is there anything time sensitive about this? How are we taking 2019 bookings now? Through you to staff.
Good question, staff.
Thank you for the question. So if these rates are not approved, the staff cannot book for 2019. So there's a potential where we would lose those 14 or others as time goes by. One option could be to bring the information back for the quarterly report for the third quarter, and perhaps bring a more fulsome, comprehensive review of rates for the rate setting next July. But approving it today allows us to start booking those 14 and others in 2019.
So,
Member Quirk, you still have the floor.
yeah, so my point is, obviously, we do want to start booking 2019 so we can start getting a feel of demand. So I don't want to delay that process, but I'm wondering if there is an opportunity, and again, I don't want to do it on the fly. That's the other problem with us not moving to, is there a way that we can approve these current rates with the caveat that we reserve the right to potentially increase rates as part of our next budget cycle as we do the 2017 budget, or 2018 budget?
I would suggest that is a possibility. Obviously, that's going to require an amendment to this. But again, understanding that the marketplace probably relies on predictability, and putting that out there may discourage people because there isn't that predictability and that cost certainty. So I will just leave that out there. If you want to bring forward that
I would suggest
amendment.
if the public knew that I was thinking raising the rates, they might book earlier. But I'd be happy to approve this as is now, but have that conversation further.
Okay, but I'm going to refer to Mr. Barrick as far as that comment.
Great, thank you. So, yeah, one option is to approve it and allow staff to book those that are on the list for 2019. If the board chooses to adjust the rates again for the 2019 season, that would be reflected for any new bookings thereafter, and not ideally retroactively impact those folks that have already booked.
Okay. Member Joyner and then Member Timms.
Well, Mr. Chair, I was hoping to defer this because I haven't spoke to it, but I feel like I have to speak to it now because I am not in favor of voting for this today. I believe that people will
be booking ahead of time for 219 because they know of the inflationary issues that go on with all halls and all conservation, any place that they want to have a wedding. So I'm in full agreement with Member Diodati to have this report come back with a more fulsome report. So therefore, I would not be in favor of supporting this today. If those 14 couples are interested in 219 today, they will be interested in this conservation area in October for 219 as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and I'm sensing an appetite to have this deferred, so if there is a member that would like to...
Mr. Chairman,
Member
I
Timms.
do not wish to refer.
You can
or
speak to it then.
defer. A couple of questions were asked about these rates apply 7 days a week, so that question wasn't answered, I don't think.
I don't think it was answered because those details haven't come forward yet. That's been staff direction to bring
the
forward those.
implication in the schedule is that these apply whatever day you book during the week, and staff can tell me that, yes or no?
That's correct. 7
Okay.
days a week.
Right. Okay, so my other concern is that establishing the rate and carrying on business without delay is, I think, the best approach to make sure we take full advantage. We've heard from staff that this is middle market, and did I understand that correctly, that we're not bottom of the market, we're not top of the market, that we are middle market with these rates for simple renting of the location? Staff?
We are middle of the market, but again, when you have a wedding here, you can make it whatever you'd like. You can make it high end, you can make it low end, you can make it middle end. But for rental facilities, we're in the middle.
Right, okay, so that's where I think we want to be. So, no, I'm in favor of supporting the staff recommendation right now and get on with business and lock down those 19 and whatever else is comes along in the next 2 months. Because we will, if we delay, we will not be able to book any of 2019 for the next 2 months until we come back and approve whatever adjustments that are being offered at that time. So, no, I'm not in favor of defer. I would put is the motion on the floor to accept at this point? I would put that motion on the floor. Staff recommendation.
Through the chair, I just want to find out, for those individuals that are opposed to this, is it because you think we should be charging more, or we should just remain the same? Just so staff have a little bit more direction. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that, yeah, and I'm thinking maybe a compromise here. For the 14 couples that have looked and discussing, I like the compromise. I forget who said it, I think Member Quirk, but if we approve 2019 for those 14 couples, and then no further booking, because there's no one in the queue right now, till we get the rates, and I think a breakdown based on days, because obviously a Tuesday and a Saturday should have a different price, and a bit of a comparison with some of our competition so that we can see where we are. Are we really in the middle? I like to see the actual numbers, and see the opportunity that we have before, and then what other peripheral opportunities like photography or whatever other, because I think this is a great place, to get married. What a great opportunity. What a neat thing that you could, like you said, you can dress it up or dress it down, whatever way you want to go, but it's very popular these days. So I'd be happy to kind of compromise, not defer it, but not approve it. We don't have, it's the same rate 7 days a week. It's, to me, that, yeah, it's got to be fixed.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Member Kaspis, you still have the floor. You good? Okay, so then I'm going to charge the board this way then. I'm going to suggest then that the compromise that Member Diodati has asked for, and I heard echoed in Member Quirk's comments, it's fundamentally different than what the motion is here. So I'm going to suggest then that this motion is defeated, and if a member would like to put another motion on the floor which respects the comments that we've heard around the table, I will certainly entertain that one at this time as well.
Actually, Chair, if I may, you could do an amendment to the recommendation. And
Okay.
it would simply be that the recommendation that the NPCA board approve the proposed 2019 Balls Falls Wedding and Corporate Fee Structure for 2019 as outlined in Appendix 1 of this report, pending a review of the 2018 budget. So that would put the rates in place until we can look at the 2018 budget, which we will be talking about in October anyway. But does that satisfy the member?
I kind of like better what the chair was saying. I'll tell you why, because there's going to be more couples coming forward in the next 2 months. And it puts them in kind of I'd rather them know that we are looking, we're reviewing. And I like the idea that we approve them for the 14 couples, and any further bookings will be based on the report that we get from staff.
So I appreciate Member Diodati's comments through you, Chair. I would just say that I don't want to dissuade people from booking here, because if they come to us and they want to book 2019 now, between now and October, even at the current rate, I would rather get the booking rather than turn people away. So I think I'm talking about beyond the 14 that are there now. I'm saying that we accept that rate and for 2019 bookings and then change the rate. If we sell out between now and 2019, that's money in the bank and we're good to go. If it's a matter of, like, if we're going to increase the rates, marginally to make it more competitive, or if it's going to be significant, I wouldn't want those people to start looking. When you start planning your wedding, you're going to be looking for places right away. And if this place, they're being turned away here because we don't know how much we're going to charge them, then they could go look elsewhere, right? Or you say you can book it and we'll give you a tentative booking. We don't know how much we're going to charge you yet. It's a little bit tricky that way.
Through you, Chair, and that makes sense. My other thinking, though, is if they are a couple looking to book, and I don't know if these are, here's the problem, are these Saturdays, Fridays, Sundays? Maybe if they realize, well, geez, if we get married on Thursday, it's only going to be $1,500, and that might free up more Saturdays where we can make $2,700. So I'm just thinking, with a full plan, a full business plan together, I think we'll be able to get more out of this, and it'll give them more options as well if they're on a budget.
Right now is we want to be sensitive to the 14 couples that are in the queue right now. So I'm sure language can be brought forward that respects the 14 couples in the queue right now, and then compels staff to come back with a more fulsome fee schedule. I'll defer to Mr. Barrick for comment.
Thank you, Chair. I would offer up some possible wording on the basis that the existing recommendation here be approved on an interim basis until the rates and fees report comes forward in the fall. It could be, say, in September, because the staff have to come forward for the campground rates and fees for approval anyway. There is a subsequent report coming in September or October, and part of that report could include an updated schedule with additional information. But if these rates are approved on an interim basis until that report comes forward, I think that may solve the challenges around the table currently.
Okay, so that's a suggestion coming forward from staff. I'll take speakers to those comments. Member Shurton.
I like what I'm hearing here. My other thought here is let the 14 people know the 219 schedule, and also that if you guys don't want to get married on a Saturday, there might potentially be a reduction if you got married on a Thursday afternoon or Thursday night. So it'll be a max of this rate for the 14. There might be potential because, like Jim Diodati here is saying, member, rates, that could free up other days. So let them know these are the rates for you 14, and there might be a chance, check back after October, there might be some flexibility in other days.
Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do right now, just to cut the discussion quickly, I'm going to entertain an amendment to this particular motion. I will decide as chair whether it's fundamentally different, and at that particular time I'll make a ruling. So I will entertain amendments to this this motion right now. Let me go to Member Diodati first.
So I'd be comfortable, obviously, that the board receive the report as it's stated and apply the 2019 rates to the 14 couples that are in the queue, and further bookings be delayed until the October meeting when we get the full rates structure, where we'll also be provided, other peripheral opportunities for fundraising at our events. My concern with what Mr. Barrick had suggested, it allows this rate to continue on for everyone that comes forward, and everyone's going to rush in, not knowing what's going to happen. I think it's more fair that we have the roadmap out, so everyone knows exactly the rates and the schedules, and then they can book full knowledge of where we're going, rather than them thinking, quick, everybody book right now, because we don't know where rates are going to go, and the rumor mill is going to get going, and they're going to think we're going to 10 grand, and I'd rather just, those people know the rates that we're looking at, book them in, and for everybody else, we're going to have a full schedule, and there'll be incentives if you go other than a Saturday night or a Friday night.
Okay.
So sorry for the
Nope,
added
it's fine.
dialogue.
So I'm taking those comments. I'm going to make a ruling then that those particular amendments are fundamentally different than what we have on the floor right now. The ruling is those amendments are out of order. I'm going to call the question to this motion right now, that the NPCA board approve the proposed 2019 Balls Falls wedding and corporate fee structure for 2019 as outlined in Appendix 1 of this report. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? And that is defeated. I will entertain a new motion respecting the 14 couples and certainly staff's commitment to Member Giudice.
So if you can help me wordsmith this, Mr. Chair, I'll wait till I have your attention. Okay. So that we receive the report and that we implement the 2019 fee schedule for the 14 couples that are currently in the queue, and that staff come back to our next meeting with a full schedule and a breakdown for different days with rates and comparisons, as well as peripheral complementary opportunities for us to raise money at these events. You can massage that a little bit so that it makes sense. I'm just winging it.
Okay, so the wording is, the motion is that the NPCA board approve the 2019 fee schedule for the confirmed 14 couples currently in the queue. And again, you know, we'll massage that. That staff come back with a more detailed fee schedule that highlights opportunities for other services and a daily schedule. So more details, yeah. Okay. Speaking to that motion, Member Quirk.
Well, I was going to second it first.
Okay, thank you.
And then if I could just speak to it briefly, I just want to ensure that this doesn't, I'm not sure what our process is, whether if someone books a date or asks for a date, that they have to put a deposit down on that date. I don't want to dissuade anyone from booking a date, being able to take a deposit, and if the rates change, then those other people should be able to withdraw with the deposit over and above that until the rates are confirmed, right? Because if I'm putting down $500 on that particular date because I want to hold the date, then I think they should also be allowed to, if we change the rates, they should be entitled to take that back if the rates are not to their liking. Because that way at least we can also see what the demand is there. I think the general public knows that we're not going to go too crazy with these rates. It's never been our intention to do that. But I think the idea is that they might see an opportunity if they booked a Friday and there's a cheaper on a Thursday, they might move to Thursday and free up a Friday. So I think staff has to show some flexibility to people who contact us between now and September.
Okay, so speaking to that one, I'm going to defer that to Adam. Do we have a refund policy as it stands right now with deposits that are made towards that?
We do not give a refund. So that's our policy right now. So we might have to do some adjustment if we're going to do something like we're talking about.
Okay, and that would be an interim policy until we formally establish a set. But what we're talking about is an interim period right now to accommodate the 14 couples, but until this board gets more information as far as ratifying a fee schedule moving forward. I need a date though. What date are we looking at to bring that information back to this board? September? Okay, so that's going to come back in September. Okay?
Yeah, just my only, somebody calls going forward beyond the 14 couples, what are we doing with them? So if somebody calls tomorrow or today, what's the procedure?
Well, to the comments around, I think we take the deposit, making sure that we convey that the fee schedule is being updated, and possibly they'll have that information by September or October.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Well, yes. speaking to, so our deposit is non-refundable now?
Correct.
Okay, so let's clarify that then. So the caveat to that point, with respect to this interim period, that deposit will be refundable. Okay, so let's make sure we're clear on that one. Okay?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so that motion is on the floor for question or comments. Member Quirk, you still have the floor.
And Chair, sorry to belabor this point, but just be clear, for the 14 couples that we're holding this new rate for and we're doing it on an interim basis, those are not refundable. Those 14 are going to book and we're going to be good. I'm just concerned about people who are now booking for 2019 between now and when we come up with the final report. So just so everyone's clear on what we're trying to do here, try to be fair to everyone and not delay our potential bookings.
Correct. Thank you for those comments. Member Diodati?
Would we add in now, too, that the chair be authorized to preside over weddings at $500 As another opportunity?
I am not licensed.
Well, you should be. You should be.
But maybe we'll add that service in the future, but that's a good comment. Any other question or comments to the motion put forward? And again, for clarity, Lisa, if you want to attempt to read that motion right now, just for the benefit of public and certainly our board.
So what I have right now is to receive Report 8717 and implement the 2019 fee schedule for the 14 couples currently confirmed. And staff will provide a detailed fee schedule highlighting opportunities at this September meeting. Is that okay?
We're going to assume that.
Because Member Shirk, I said, well, maybe our chair could wear his CFL uniform and bring his, and he didn't know. He didn't know that you played football.
Oh, really?
He said, I thought he was just a sharp-dressed chair. And I said, no, he's a Grey Cup guy.
All right,
so bring the cup with you.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate those comments.
Add more value to the wedding.
There you go. Seeing no other speakers to the motion that's on the floor, I'm going to call the question. All those members in favor of that motion? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. That was a great discussion. And again, moving forward, to Member Quirk's point, we want to be fair to everybody. So there is an appetite around the board to see what other opportunities are out there. I respect that process, but I also respect the 14 couples that have already booked at this particular rate. So we're going to try to accommodate all those parties involved in the discussion. So thank you for that. Our next item of business, Conservation Ontario Biennial Tour 2019, report number 8817. Can I get a mover for that one to put it on the floor? Member Kasperset, seconded by Member Beatty. That motion is on the floor for question or comments. Member Beatty.
It's a great opportunity, and I see we have a number of people going to the Halton tour in the fall to get an idea firsthand what occurs. I don't think it's too early to talk about having a preliminary committee formed to start planning for that event, looking at activities, looking at possible venues, etc. Right now, my thought is I wonder about the Hilton Garden and its proximity to Niagara College, the Wood End Center, etc., in terms of a home base. But I think that it's something we should start looking at now in terms of planning exercise.
All great comments, and again, the commitment that this board is making obviously has to be conveyed to our partners at Conservation Ontario, and that has to be conveyed through their newsletter and certainly to our 35 Conservation Authority partners. So speaking to this motion, Member Quirk.
Thank you, Chair. I understand that this is our recommendation to let the other authorities know that we're willing to do it. I know you've had preliminary discussions with those other authorities that were interested in doing it, that they were prepared to let us take it on. Once they see this, is there a good indication that they'll turn around very quickly and sort of withdraw their intention? Or how quickly will we know? Because to Member Beatty's point, this tour is in October. We'll have like one board meeting between then. I actually think that if we are going to have a group going there to the tour, one of the nice things that we would have would be sort of a showcase of what they can expect in 2019, sort of a teaser presentation. And I think to that point, it probably be worthwhile having a conversation how that would work.
Yeah, no, I agree. So to your original question, yes, the appetite is there. In my preliminary conversations, they have no problem stepping aside and allowing the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority to host a 2019 biennial tour. To your other point, absolutely. That's probably the opportunity where they would announce it in October at the biennial tour for 2017 that the NPCA has taken on the responsibility of hosting for 2019. So to your point, as far as striking a committee or some kind of formally organized body to start the process, I do like that idea. How we would do that, obviously maybe, yeah, okay, so I don't think it's too late to do that in September and have that little planning session between September and October that we could pass on to our counterparts. So yes, time sensitive, but not so much that we can't bring that forward for September. I'll ask staff to come forward with a set of terms of reference as far as that subcommittee and some planning details and what those responsibilities will entail for the members that decide to sit on it. Member Quirk?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, if I just sort of take, I know we do this, but through staff direction, to talk to our communications guys, to think about pictures, videos, things that we can get over the course of this summer to start putting into that, whatever would be sort of the presentation video, brochure type idea, just to have that in the back of their mind as things are going on this summer and any of the events that we've been able to capture so far, because I like Member Beatty's idea. We could actually start probably making a list of where we'd like people to go on a tour, and we can worry about the logistics later, but we all know the places we want to take them, and it'd be nice to get some pictures and stuff going on with that.
With some of that information coming forward to the board for September. Member Kaspersets?
To the chair, my only concern is that we have the Balls Falls Thanksgiving Festival, and that in itself takes a lot of hours to plan and everything else. So let's just make sure we've got a lot of people on this to handle it.
Good points. Good comments. Any other question or comments with respect to this? So basically, this is a formal endorsement that the NPCA, through board ratification, has confirmed their desire and willingness to host for 2019. I do want to make an important a distinction. This is Lisa's initiative. She's the one that brought it to my attention, and thank you, Lisa, for bringing this forward. It was her idea that precipitated the conversations with our conversation partners, so thank you for that, Lisa. So we'll call the question that the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority formally confirm its desire and willingness to host and organize the 2019 Conservation Ontario Biennial Tour as it coincides with the NPCA's 60th anniversary, and that this action be communicated to Conservation Ontario, Central Lake Ontario Conservation Authority, and Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay. Any other business that members would like to bring forward? Member Beatty?
Other than just to mention that there's a communication device called SNAP, I think it is, in terms of the St. Catharines area. And much to my surprise, they picked up the information about our watershed tree project and apparently published the poem of the lady, and she was quite flattered by that.
Good.
To hear that news.
Okay. Any other business? And I will add, please take the time to read the second quarterly report. I thought it was very well done, so thank you, staff, for putting that together. Great metrics, great data that we can pass on to our host municipalities and certainly the public. Just a very, very well thought out document. And obviously, quarterly reports come out 4 times a year. This is the second one. We are on course and doing some incredible things in the community. So make sure you convey those good news stories to your respective municipalities and certainly our partners in Niagara. Seeing no other business, I will need a motion that the meeting move to closed session to receive an unsolicited proposal related to public and media relations and a legal update involving identifiable individuals. Moved by Member Shurton, seconded by Member DeFrucio. All those in favor of moving into closed session? Opposed? And that is carried. We are now in closed session, so thank you. Okay, I'm calling the session back into open session. I will need a mover. The motion to be read, follow board direction provided in closed session. Can I get a mover for that, please? Moved by Member Kasperset, seconded by Member Shurton. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. I will need a mover for adjournment. Moved by Member Kasperset, seconded by Member Joyner. All those in favor? Opposed? And we are adjourned.